you know what a transportation planner does? These are the experts who ensure our ability to get around town, whether it be by bus, by car, by bike, or on foot. A planner is behind the scenes. Today we will discuss the Santa Monica Pedestrian Action Plan with the city's principal transportation planner, Beth Rowlandson. Welcome, Beth. Let's talk.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So, what do we know about walkers in Santa Monica?
We know that just about everyone enjoys walking in Santa Monica. We know it's the #1 recreational activity people say they do, and it's their #1 form of getting exercise. And we know everyone does it from small children with their parents, kids going to school, people going to work. We know people enjoy having the ability to walk to the beach or go to one of their nearby shopping areas to pick some things up. So we know just about everyone does it.
So there's a lot of walkers.
Yes.
How many walkers do we have?
Gosh, we have about 80,000 people here, so I'm going to say just about all of them are walking. And then everyone else who comes to town too, whether you're, once you lock up your bike, everyone who rides the bus as they get to the bus stop or leaving the bus stop, they're walking too. And even if you identify as you got somewhere by driving, on either end of that trip, you're walking too.
So walking's involved.
Absolutely.
So it is, for this reason, you actually have to have a plan. So tell me, how does one go about creating a pedestrian action plan? I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And it's a little bit of a funny thing too, because it's all about walking, which is really fundamental to what people do every day. But what we've been doing is looking at the patterns of where people are walking and what makes a good walking environment. And then we're actually thinking about what the future of Santa Monica will be like. We are getting light rail for the first time in decades, that it's going to open in about a year and a half. And we know the locations where those 3 stops are in Santa Monica are places where you don't see a lot of pedestrians right now, but there's going to be a lot of pedestrian activity. So we are anticipating where people are going to be wanting to go and how they're going to get to the stations, and a lot of that involves walking too. We're also looking at what the safety record is in Santa Monica and what types of crashes we have, making sure people can get to transit, and finding just places where we can make it more comfortable for people too.
So you had to do an extensive safety analysis, I know. So tell me just a little bit about that. I know you mentioned, the peak times that people walk, and then you have to, but what else besides safety? You have to look at all sorts of other things as well. So just briefly describe, how did you do the safety analysis, and then what other things, you have engineering, and kind of just give us a little behind the scenes tour of, creating this type of analysis.
Sure. So every time that there is a crash between a motorist and a pedestrian, and the pedestrian is injured, the Santa Monica Police Department will come and do a report. So what we've been able to do is look at all the statistics over the past 10 years about all those collisions between pedestrians and automobiles, and look at the location of the accidents. We know that there's a lot more accidents, say in our downtown, in some of our busy boulevards like Wilshire, Santa Monica, Pico, and Ocean Avenue. But we also look at things like time of day and day of the week and month of the year to see what kind of trends we're seeing, so we can formulate a plan. We know there's we weren't surprised when we saw the most accidents were in October, November, December, when it's wintertime, the days are the longest, the time change. But we were a little surprised to see that May was one of the top months too. We also found out that there are more accidents on weekdays than there are on weekends, which was a little counterintuitive.
On Thursday, I think.
Yeah, it was Thursday, and that was true throughout the year. And that while less accidents happen at nighttime, they're more likely to have a fatality involved, because that was one of the big reasons why we started to do a plan. Was unfortunately every year in Santa Monica we do have at least one pedestrian fatality, and we're really moving towards kind of a zero pedestrian injuries community.
Yeah, that's very hopeful, and I sure as heck hope that happens, because I know on Montana Avenue there's been issues. So when you're doing these type of plans, do you think specifically about maybe kids with families? I mean, kids with families with kids, and you know, how do you look at the needs of a family with kids, and then you have to look, what about seniors? You know, so how do you differentiate, and then what questions do you have to ask yourself in order to figure out how to deal with those populations?
Well, when we're developing the plan, we look at not only what's happening and what the future will be like, but how can we affect change? What kinds of priorities should the city and the community have to make it safer and easier to walk? So some of those are design or engineering elements of how the street is designed. If we should have a curb extension, so it's shorter distance for pedestrians to cross the street. Should we be putting in traffic signals? We're also looking at enforcement. The police department do a great job, but there's only so many of them. So how should they focus their enforcement efforts to make it safe? We look at education. What important messages is it to give, what important messages and what's a good way to communicate with people. We also look at encouragement activities, because we want to make it easier for people to walk, and it's really important for students to have a healthy lifestyle and make it easier for students to walk. Encouragement is a way to do that. So when we look at kids or we look at seniors, we think about how we need to modify each of those changes to suit their particular needs. So for design, we're looking at locations where it might be suitable to have longer crossing times, because seniors might not be able to cross the street as quickly as other folks. And for students, we do audits where we walk around the elementary schools and the middle schools and do an analysis of what those particular streets are and where families are walking, to see how we can prioritize making changes in those areas.
And then you're also doing extensive, like an awareness campaign. I mean, I know you've visited the commissions, and so what type of feedback are you getting? What's happening overall? Are you getting positive feedback? I mean, of course, everybody wants to have walking be the #1 means of transportation for a number of reasons, not the least of which is getting cars off the street. But what kind of feedback are you getting so far?
Everyone has an opinion about walking in Santa Monica. We hear a lot about specific locations. People want to make it easier to walk in their neighborhoods or to get to certain destinations. But we're also hearing some themes from people about things they'd like to have changed. Residents are telling us that they're concerned about the conflicts, not only between cars and pedestrians, but bicyclists and skateboarders and pedestrians too, and making sure everyone is respectful and giving everyone space. As we travel in Santa Monica, people want to have better crossing treatments or markings on the street to make it really clear where pedestrians are supposed to cross the street. They want wider sidewalks, and they want enforcement from the police department too. So those are some of the themes that we've been hearing. And
so in general, though, people are interested in participating. You're doing workshops as well. Tell us a little bit about your workshops.
So we have had an initial workshop in 2013 where we asked members from throughout the community to participate and let us know what they thought was important about walking in Santa Monica. We had some online survey tools where people told us what was important in specific locations. And we've been going to boards and commissions and our neighborhood groups to get their input too, and we've been synthesizing that and putting it all together, reporting out some of our findings from the safety analysis. And we really hope at the end of summer 2014 we'll have a draft plan and can speak to folks about it in the fall to make sure we're on the right track and prioritizing what's important to the community.
So for those of us who don't know much about the process, okay, so you create the draft plan, and then what happens? It goes to City Council. So tell us, from start to finish, how long does something like this take? And when will we actually see it in action? I mean, hopefully.
The plan itself is taking about 18 months to put all together and get all the input and all the analysis. From here, we'll publish a draft plan, and it'll be available for the public to review. And we'll also do some workshops and some other outreach to let people know what's in the plan. And I think there'll be some questions about what priorities people want and how they react to how we've prioritized things based on our research. Then it will go to the City Council for their adoption. Now, we're not just sitting and waiting to improve the pedestrian environment until the plan's approved. We're going ahead and trying different things now and implementing changes. So we are doing everything from updating signs to systematically going throughout the city and updating the paint for crosswalks. We are evaluating specific areas like near the hospitals where we've gotten feedback about pedestrian concerns, and we are doing education and encouragement activities through supporting efforts that are happening at the schools through something called Safe Routes to School.
So how, if somebody wanted to get involved, I mean, they see this show, how can they get involved? I mean, how can they send you their feedback, or are you doing online surveys, or?
Right now, the best thing for them to do is they can contact me directly, or they can look up information on the Pedestrian Action Plan on the City of Santa Monica's website. There's different ways to get involved there and to see the background to date. So that they can be informed as soon as that draft plan is released, and make sure we let them know about the workshop we're going to have in the fall.
And then what groups you're working with? Some groups currently. Can you just tell me one or two that you might be working with?
Yeah, that we have been able to reach out and got a lot of positive response from the neighborhood associations. Also, the Disabilities Commission has been really active, and the commission on the Senior Commission has been really interested and provided some great feedback.
Well, good. We're going to talk more about other groups when we get back.
Great.
So our ability to interact with friends, go shopping, go to the movies, or just take a sunset walk on the beach, it's all predicated on the availability of suitable transportation. For many older adults, walking may be their primary means of transportation. Our ability to partake in these activities is directly related to our quality of life. Beth Rowlandson, Principal Transportation Planner with the City of Santa Monica, is discussing the Pedestrian Action Plan. More to come on Let's Talk.
Riding a bicycle can seem like child's play.
But only if you're playing indoors.
Riding in the real street has real consequences.
Play it safe. Ride by the rules. Cars and bikes need to play together.
Santa Monica Walks is a walking group in Santa Monica whose sole mission is to educate residents about their numerous options when walking in our beautiful city. Grace Phillips, the founder of Santa Monica Walks, is joining us now to discuss her role in assisting Beth create a plan that residents can live and walk with. Welcome, Grace.
Hi.
Let's talk. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself so that we can get an idea of how you kind of mesh in this plan?
I'm a landscaper by trade, and a sort of public space activist, I guess you would call me. I'm an urban planner by training, and I just greatly believe in the public good of street space. And I'm the chair of the Urban Forest Task Force, and I'm on the Stormwater Committee. I guess it's called the Clean Beaches Committee. And I just believe in all aspects of sort of enhancing the pedestrian environment. So I got involved, I guess, because I was running Bike It Walk It Day for the district, and the bike plan had just happened. And I don't know if was I talking to you? I think I was talking to you, and they had just decided to do a pedestrian plan sort of modeled after the bike plan. And there isn't a group of people that really self-identifies as pedestrian, even though we are all pedestrians in our day, every day. So they sort of hinted that they needed somebody to represent the pedestrians in the city because it wasn't a group that was as vocal as the bike group. And I realized from the work I had done in my urban planning thesis that the people who use the street the most and who depend on the street the most are often people who don't necessarily know how to involve themselves in something as sort of academic and involved as a pedestrian action plan. So I decided that the way I could help out would be to reach out to groups that had people who weren't necessarily going to be involved in a pedestrian plan anyway. And so I tried to partner with community organizations like YWCA, now my mind is going to go completely blank, YMCA, Venice Family Clinic. Santa Monica Spoke is bike. Only. They're just bike, yeah. Okay. So there is somebody from Santa Monica Spoke who's on our advisory committee. But I was really trying to reach out to people who rely on public transportation, who possibly don't have cars, who are possibly lower income, who are possibly minority, possibly don't speak English. I really wanted to see if I could get that voice represented. And the main piece of information that I wanted to know was, what are the obstacles for you in terms of walking in the city? What makes you not want to walk? What keeps you from walking? What are you afraid of when you walk? And most of what we did a survey and we administered it through all these partner organizations that we were working with. And we got several hundred back. I can't remember the total amount, but really the single biggest thing that came back was fear of cars. So I haven't given you guys that yet, but you know, I think in order to have some equity in our transportation system, we have so ceded the street to the car that it's time now for other users to start saying, hey, you know, I would also like to have some right to use that. LA Walks, which is who I sort of base Santa Monica Walks on, they have a saying that says, hey, I'm walking here. And that's really what it's about. It's about creating some awareness that there are pedestrians who are using the street. And it's not just about cars getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible.
And why do you think walking is so important? I mean, there's a number of reasons why it's important, but why is it important in our city?
I mean, if you can't walk in Santa Monica, you can't walk anywhere. I mean, we're basically flat. We have amazing weather. We have very good sidewalks. We're a well-run, well-funded city. I mean, if we can't make it work here, it's just hopeless. Like, everybody should just stop walking. So I just feel like, you know, with my particular interest came from working through the Bike It, Walk It program in the Santa Monica Malibu district, because I started realizing that there's something called the Governor's Fitness Test, and every kid, I think it's 3rd, 5th, 8th, it's not every year, but it's throughout the years. They have these metrics for sort of figuring out how kids are doing, and I was really affected by looking at the fitness test results for some of the schools in our district versus other schools in our district, and I was just really shocked by the difference in these populations. So I wanted to, when I tried to talk to parents about why isn't your child walking to school, they'd say it was really drivers. Mm-hmm. So I felt like that was really what drove me to be involved. Was I'm interested in it as a sort of public health thing, because obviously kids who are at risk for obesity and aren't walking to school, there's a very easy synchronicity there if we can fix the environment.
And you walk. Where do you walk? Where do you and your family walk?
Well, my kids walk to school. They walk home from school. I walk to the market. I mean, the reason we live where we live is because we can walk everywhere. And I'm one of those people who would rather live in a smaller house somewhere walkable than in a bigger house somewhere unwalkable. But I grew up in walkable cities, Boston, New York, Philadelphia. So it's just always been in my life, and I would hate to live somewhere where I couldn't walk.
So you did mention the idea behind Santa Monica Walks. You kind of alluded to another group. So what other groups are there that are walking groups specifically? Because there are a lot of biking groups.
Yeah.
And then how do the walking groups feel about the biking groups? And are they working together? Or How's that looking
Well,
from your perspective?
I'm a pretty frank person, so I don't know if Beth can say all this, but I'll tell you my point of view. And I do bike. I'm just not like a bike person.
Right.
I'm somebody who bikes. There is a sort of statewide group of organizations, and most of us are related to California Walks.
Okay.
And so if you go on California Walks, you'll see there's all these different communities have different names for their pedestrian action groups, and it really depends on the personalities involved, how intense they are. But I guess my sort of awareness of this as a problem came about because we were working on a master plan for the urban forest for Santa Monica, and we often have very, very small parkways to plant trees in, and then a very, very wide street. So we'll have a 3-foot parkway, a 60-foot street, and a 3-foot parkway. And you don't really need 60 feet in your street if you're just a residential, kind of 2-lane street. I don't know what you call those, but I kept saying, gosh, I wish we could bump the curb out and have more space in the parkway. And what happened was that while we were talking about all this, the bike plan was being formed. And when the bike plan started being put into practice in the city, it was very easy for the city to just allot that extra space to a bike lane. And that makes sense. I mean, it's great for bikers, and I really appreciate it when I'm on a bike. But it was frustrating from the tree point of view because it's much more expensive to move the curb and make the parkway wider. I mean, it's kind of ridiculously expensive. So I just saw that, when it comes to improving the pedestrian experience by adding canopy to the street, that really was not even really on the table because the bike plan was taking up that excess width. And there wasn't room to then move the curb. So that's my 2 cents.
The city is taking all this under consideration. I'm sure you're looking at how you can expand to add more safe walking areas. But as a parent, what do you tell other parents when they say, you just said they don't want their kids to walk to school? What would you tell them? What's your advice to them?
The crossing guards put their lives on the line every day. It is intense what the crossing guards go through, and I would only recommend crossing with a crossing guard. So my kids are very religious about that. In terms of walking elsewhere, I've taught my kids to be very savvy about car behavior, and that if you can make eye contact with the driver, you're in a much better position, and just wait until you can. So, I think that people who don't want to walk are not going to walk no matter what you say to them, and you just have to accept that that's part of our population. I just want to make it easier for the people who want to walk,
Exactly.
And that's not a huge group, but that is a group out there.
But it's going to be growing. I mean, we have a lot of older adults that walk, that want to walk.
Yeah.
And that need to walk. I mean, like you said, for health reasons.
Yeah.
I think it's important. But what would you tell drivers about walkers? Because we really have to educate people. I mean, I'm sure this is coming up in the plan. I mean, drivers have to be made drivers are taking over the streets. I mean,
Yeah.
even bicyclists are having issues with drivers. But what would you personally say to drivers about walking? Since you're in a walking group and you're advocating for walking, what is your advice to drivers relative to
I just don't think any rush is worth someone's life. And I may sound melodramatic, but there have been so many pedestrian deaths in the city. It's just upsetting. It's all avoidable. And I think we all know, we're probably all drivers, and we all know you're in a rush, you're thinking about something, there's a blind spot. It's really easy to not see people. What can I say to drivers? They need to share. It's what I say to a 3-year-old, like share, So that's basically it.
Yeah, so what's your favorite place to walk in Santa Monica? Or tell us what are some great places to walk in Santa Monica in general.
I just always try to choose a street I haven't walked down before.
Oh.
So I don't like carving ruts in certain streets. I would always like to go a different way. I actually walk in alleys a lot, which sounds bizarre, but it's always interesting. It's very different than the street. Things look different. You see different things.
Probably less cars there.
Yeah, it's actually, you can relax a little bit sometimes in certain alleys. But every street has a different feel to it, and I'm always interested in why something works, why it doesn't work. So I always try to take a different route.
Your urban planning background.
Yeah.
So this question is for both of you. what are the next steps for Santa Monica Walks, and then what are your next steps with the plan? And you go first, Grace.
Well, we took our survey results because I do not have the time or funding to do a big sort of online thing like the city did for the pedestrian action plan. And I felt like they'd sort of gotten those people. Mm-hmm. They've got the tech savvy people. I wanted people who were, you know, more comfortable
going to be writing
something
pen and paper, right?
So we compiled it all, and I had a really wonderful student at UCLA, an urban planning student, put it together in a GIS database for me so that it's mapped. And so that's actually the product that I have for the city is a map that shows where people feel least safe. And in terms of prioritizing, because you know the city doesn't have enough money to just sort of roll all this stuff out at once and implement it all at once. My recommendation would be that you prioritize by user need, and you just say, let's go to the most dangerous places first and the least pleasant places first, and then move out from there. So that's, I'll get that to you at some point.
That's good advice. And Beth, you got 30 seconds. So what's your next step?
Well, I think it's taking that technical analysis that we've done, matching it with what we're hearing from people about what's important from them, such as the work that Santa Monica Walks has done, and putting it together in some type of prioritization list to see, okay, what can we do in 5 years? What can we do in 10 years? What can we do in 20 years? And bringing it back out to people and seeing if we're how close we are and what we can do so we can start implementing it.
Okay, and modify as needed.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your views and sharing the plan. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you walking.
Yeah.
Thanks. Our program is brought to you by the Commission for the Senior Community, focusing on preserving and improving the quality of life for Santa Monicans 60 and older. For more information, visit our website on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching Let's Talk. Till next time, be well, live well, age well.